Hi, this is Carol Robinson. Welcome to this edition of County Happenings, where we find out what's happening in the county by talking to the one and only Mayor Rogers Anderson.
How are you today?
I am flying high.
Never start off a sentence with but
No.
you know, lots of things are happening in Williamson County. It continues to be one of the fastest growing counties, and of course I know you know this, but it's really cities that are growing. The county's pretty stable.
Although we've had a lot of new homes going up, surprisingly, I don't think in all the time we've lived here I've seen as many new homes going up within a 5-mile radius of my house.
In the unincorporated area. And
That's
I think
correct.
It's important for our viewers that we all know that Williamson County grew about 44-45% in a 10-year window from 2000 to 2010. But I'm going to give you another statistic that we've been touting.
This one's a scary one, if this is the one.
Yes, and you've heard it.
Yeah.
Is that the assessed value, and let's define what assessed value is. The assessed value is taking your home, and all assessed value is on residential homes is 25%.
25% of the value of the home.
Value. So if you've got a home, and I'll just pull one out of $400,000, we would put the taxes on the $100,000. 25% of 400 is $100,000, and our tax rate in the unincorporated area is $2.31, same as it's been for years and years. That's not to say we've not had an adjustment on that tax rate or even a tax increase, because we have. But the tax rate is less today than what it was 15 or 20 years ago. Now that's playing around with numbers, so I'm not going to try to convince anybody that it's the same.
All they know is their taxes have gone up.
That's correct. Some of that growth, though, is the value of the home. The home you may have paid X amount for today is valued at this, so that if you ever go to sell it, there's a balancing, and that's done through the property assessors.
Right, and just a note, when all the homes were they had the
Reappraisal.
reappraisal. Well, even when we had the recession, and home values all over the country were going down, we weren't really hit real bad with that.
No, in certain areas, it's not just done with a twist of the knob. It's literally our property assessors go into areas and they base them on comps. In other words, what are other pieces of property, homes, land, whatever they are, in that area going for. For an example, downtown Franklin, West Main, where this building is located, you get into Hinchyville, and that area had just a complete remodeling occurring during the last 10 years, and so those values drove up the values for that whole area. Other parts of our county, and there were a lot of areas that there was really no change in values. In some places there was actually a decrease in value. But overall, over the last several years, we've had it. We did not experience what other parts of the country have done. I think that's a direct result of the commercial growth, which is taxed at a higher value percentage, of moving into our community and keeping property values at least stable.
Yeah.
And a need. We were talking before we went on the air about the values of things, and you just go through saying all this new construction. People still want to move here. People have decided that this is a great place to live. I still think it's the majority of the time, I'll get that out in a minute, is for our public education.
Yeah, because most of these people moving here have kids.
20% of our population is under 19, 20 years of age and under. So let's go back to the statement. In 2003, the assessed value, now that's that value of your home less 25%, more for commercial development, it's in the 40s, even adjusted rates for your utility companies. But in 2003, we were incorporated in 1799. We became a county in 1799. It's always so much fun to fill out when I have to fill out forms. Well, when did your business, when did the county start? And I get to write 1799.
That's kind of
and
cool.
it always they call back and say, do you mean 18 or 19? No, 1799 is when we started. So 203 years later, we had $4.2 billion worth of assessed values on the books. That's lock, stock, and barrel across the entire county. Brentwood, Franklin, Nolensville, Spring Hill, Thompson Station, Fairview, and all those other unincorporated areas. 4.2 billion. Fast forward 10 years later, 2013, we're in it right now. We have $8.3 billion worth of values on the books.
4 times.
So we doubled from 4.2 to 8.3, almost doubled in 10 years. It took us 203 years to get to the first big number that we running our calculations off from, and it took us 10 years to almost double. An amazing number, Carol.
Yeah, yeah. And the value is kind of, it's what things are selling for. Is that correct? So it's...
Well, yes and no. I don't want to mislead you. You have about 3 different values. My prior life for 25 plus years was in the insurance world, and your home may be valued at an insurable value. Your home, my home. That may be different from the tax value of what the appraisers go out and say your house is worth. And the selling price is whatever the market bears, but that's the market value. Now you have to take all of those numbers, not so much the insurance number, but you have to take all of that and put it into this blender and figure out what are the values, and that's usually comp values. That's the values around your community or in your farm. But no matter how you cut it or slice it or dice it, for a community to grow like that is an amazing feat. And it is a nightmare out on our roads.
Yeah.
And that's pretty understandable now. Some people say, well, stop the growth. You can't stop it.
You can't put gates on all ends of the county.
That. And what we have, this little piece of the world that's unique, does that mean everyone is enjoying these successes? Are there no unemployment figures out there? Do people really not have any financial issues in Williamson County? The answer to all those is no. They don't. But when you compare us to other surrounding counties and across this country, then Williamson County, through its processes, and I use that word because I think it is important that cities and counties have to work together, or you can become a metropolitan form of government. Not that that's all bad, but it's not always good either. Because the uniqueness we have in all of our cities, I'm not sure if we'd had a metropolitan form of government where we would have the uniqueness of revitalization of a downtown Franklin, for an example.
Right.
Because you would have to
distribute it equally
between all the cities.
And you find that in the little microcosm of the school system, where at one time, when the school system was much smaller, you had each high school area was its own little governing body.
In fact, it was often the community.
Yeah, exactly. So and they were truly community schools. Now that it's gotten so big, the schools can't do what really fits the community. They have to do what fits the system.
Recently, excuse me, we had Judy Haze on the show talking about Burwood. She's born, she raised here, she's county commissioner. She has her fingers in every piece of pie in the community. Wonderful Christian lady, just a beautiful person. And she was talking about that same thing, that way of life in Burwood. And that particular day she was coming to the studio, or coming to this complex, she had to wait for 6 cars to pass at the intersection in Burwood.
Oh my goodness.
And to her,
that was big.
That was big. As she had said, her dad used to sit on that same front porch, and it may be hours before somebody passed by. But if they did, they knew Carol's red car or the mayor's white truck, or they knew that. She said, I hardly know anybody anymore out there. But that's not all bad. It's not always good. We have growth issues. I think the cities have to balance that. Counties have to work with cities. Cities have to work with counties. And I think overall, I think we do a good job. I think the leadership in those respective areas tries hard for the most part to balance that, and there's all kinds of pulls and contractions and it's just a difficult thing to do, but for the most part we do get there.
Yeah, and people have to remember that if you're not moving forward, you're moving backwards, because there's always somebody that's reaching for your position.
And you talked about schools and education. There's lots and lots of dollars that have been invested in public education here in Williamson County. We have about 45 schools now, I think that's correct.
I keep losing track.
When I first moved to this community in 1979, 1980, I'm not from here originally, the number was down into the teens.
Yeah.
And, certainly no more than the 20s. We started a building program in 1988 with 4 elementary schools. They were strategically placed: Brentwood, Lipscomb, Trinity area, the Bethesda community, and the Grassland community. Trying to get elementary schools in all areas. Why did you spread those out? You had to have that to get the votes. There's 24 county commissioners in the 80s. There's still 24 of them today. And so you have to have that consensus from all of your parties. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad, but you have to address all of those needs.
Well, exactly.
Because it's just as important to someone in Fairview as it is in Burwood.
Exactly.
And
people in Fairview are paying their taxes, and they're seeing, or Burwood or College Grove, and they're seeing new things happening while theirs are getting older and older, or they don't even have the facilities.
You do, and each city has their own comprehensive land plan and their zoning uniqueness to that city. The county has a comprehensive land plan with our zoning. The growth in the county has just been negligible over the last 10 years, even with the flux we're seeing in the last year, mainly because of sewer issues and water issues. They're served by multiple different municipalities, and so what you or I, we live in a county, we don't have the avenue of public sewer. We have to rely on a septic tank. We've said that on this show many times. It's once it's installed, once it's in, it'll last 25, 50, 75 years taken care of, but it takes more land.
Right, you got to have those leach fields, and especially in a lot of the soil around this area, the clay, it doesn't seep. So you've got to have a lot more area to seep.
Before we lose track of the time, I do want to say thank you to the many veterans in our community. Just recently we
had a great parade.
Veterans Day. A little uniqueness this year. We had to have the parade, not we, but the people that organized it did it on a Friday, the Friday before the Monday, and of course Veterans Day is always celebrated on 11/11. But this year they had to change it because the schools were out on Veterans Day.
I think it was really nice, though, because it made, instead of it being just a day, it was a whole weekend.
Oh, it was.
From Friday when the parade, the breakfast or brunch before the parade, then the parade, and then Saturday there were events going on, and Sunday there were events, and then Monday the culmination of the big parade in Nashville and stuff. Yeah, it was. I think that it really was memorable.
It was, and my point of bringing it up is that as our community continues to grow, and we have several parents, grandparents coming to live in our community to be with their children and grandchildren, we are attracting more and more men and women that are veterans. Predominantly it is the male, but at the parade this year there were even 2-star generals.
Yeah.
That walked or rode in this particular case that had protection walking beside the vehicle. And I've had several people to comment, who was that person and why did they get that kind of protection walking down the streets? And I thought that's the first time that I can ever remember. It may have occurred and I just don't remember, but we had a 2-star general. We have had several 1-stars, and we've had a couple of 2-stars that have lived in our community that have passed on. But our World War II veterans, those men and women that have served are slowly dying out. You got to think it's been nearly 60 years.
Yeah, and even if they were 18, they'd be in their late 70s, early 80s when it started.
And all the national press tells us that we're losing 1,000 veterans a day, just because of age factors. But there are still some wonderful memory, and it's I know you were present at the parade, but to be around some of those men and their stories, and they kind of let their hair down, if we can use that expression, when they're around other men. It could be of the same branch of service, it could not be the same branch, but the conversations are an entirely different thing when those men get in a room and you just hear the chitter chatter. Men that maybe have some physical ailments, that they're not able to be as mobile as they would like to be. Some that are in wheelchairs, but they're there.
Yeah.
And the overwhelming outcry now of the general population to come and support the men and women that have served in the military and say thank you, whether it's a parade or just shake their hand, is just it is almost astounding to me to see how that has grown over the last several years, Carol.
And then it was touching for me. I got a chance to go to one of the key ceremonies for two of our veterans of Afghanistan, who both of them, within almost a year of each other, within days of being a year of each other, had both of their legs blown off with an IED. And the community came together and built homes for these veterans that will accommodate their needs. And the number of people that showed up for the key ceremony, I figured, well, their family would show up. There were hundreds of people, at least at the one I went to, and I'm sure there were at the other one too. It was just touching.
I know your husband, and like myself, and like so many other young men, we grew up in an era through the Vietnam era, and we both served, and we both came home. And you really, I don't know, that there were no ticker tapes, there were no parades.
You kind of came home alone. You didn't come in
that's
groups,
right.
Which was really a lot different even than World War II.
Yeah, because our World War II men have been credited, and rightfully so, the greatest generation. I've heard, I think it's Tom Brokaw's got a book out on that. If you've ever read it, it's a wonderful book. And then we go through the Korean era, that not a lot is said about that period of time, but there are a lot of men during that period of time that went through Korean conflict. Then you had the Vietnam era, which your husband and myself and many other men served, and it was, our country was not unlike what we're going through. Is discord, unrest. Wasn't a popular, but the men who are serving today, they're not seen as you're doing something that we don't agree with.
Right.
It's okay if you disagree with the government, whether it's the county or the state or the Washington, but we have to learn to separate those men and women that are protecting our freedoms. And
they're doing a job.
They're doing a job. They volunteered. Many of them are young men trying to find their way. Thank goodness an old body like mine couldn't do what those. I couldn't even carry all the equipment that they have today, much less.
Figured it out.
I figured it out. But those boys that come back, those young ladies that come back, yes, the commander-in-chief is the president of the United States, and it doesn't matter if you're a Republican or Democrat, you can not like the position that we're in, but those men and women are doing a job.
Exactly.
And that's what they have to do. Following orders, rank and file, is still very, very much needed and has to occur in the military for it to function the way it needs to function.
Well, and it has to occur in a lot of other areas of life, and these young men and women are setting an example of how to do it, and proving that when we say what's happened to this generation, that's what's happening.
Carol, changing a little bit on some other things that have happened. We're closing out 2013. This year is about gone.
Where did it go?
2014 will certainly come in with a bang. We know that we've got to build at least 2 more schools, one high school in the Nolensville area, We know that we are looking at a middle school or a combination of a K through 8 school in Nolensville. Nolensville continues to just really, really grow. Spring
So
Hill
you've got
needs
that
another.
northeast area and the south that
Yes.
are growing.
Spring Hill, the Thompson Station area certainly continues to grow, and of course Franklin has seen, and Brentwood have seen a huge amount of insurgence of new homes being built. But our new home permit list that we get is indicating we're back into 2005 and 2006, depending on what month you look at, that growth pattern. So we have stepped back 6 years, and we kind of benchmark that era of our period of time, because those were high years.
Yeah. Now, were those years higher than the late 80s, early 90s?
I think they were. I'm guessing at that. I haven't gone back that far. I could tell you though, 2004, 2005, and 2006 were phenomenal permitted years when you look at it. And then about 2006, the bottom starts slipping out from underneath us, and 2007 and 8 were just
kind of on hold.
They were on hold.
Yeah.
The new home sales were not there. But the late 80s and 90s was a period of time of awful good growth too, but I don't think it hit.
Yeah.
We hit 2002 and 2003. We were seeing unprecedented growth, and it's bared it out in our population.
Right. And I heard you say recently that there was a projection for, was it 2040, that this county will be reaching 250,000 people?
More. The year 2040, the people that do those numbers and things are saying that we will double. We're at 192. Let's just say 200,000 people.
Close to 500,000 then.
And 400,000 people will be here in the year 2040. And most everyone is saying that's probably a low number, probably get here in about 2035. Which means these cities have got to figure out how to handle the transportation and additional sewer needs and the water needs and all those infrastructure costs, because the county's not in that business.
Right.
And the cities have the right and have the ability through legislation, through the law, to annex. Now currently, annexation is on hold, except one exception, that if you own a piece of property that is contiguous, that touches the city, then you could request to come under the city limits, and that's the only exception, because there's no vote to that. You own the land, you want to come in, cities can do it if they want to do it. Now they can refuse to do it.
Right.
But for a city to go outside of that area of a resident that's not willing to do it, they just want to grow some more under the urban growth land use plans that we have. That is on hold until May. The legislators are looking at that. So the reason I bring it up is because every time we grow, that affects another individual for a school. And schools, after we're seeing around 1,000 new children in our school system for 2013, over 2,000, end of 2000. When we finished school in May of 2013, and then in August and September this year, we're up, and now we're looking at October and November, we're up about 1,000 new children. We got to have a school. Now they don't come in bundles of 25 in a classroom. They come onesies and twosies, and some communities are just scales, for an example. I think we've talked about that.
That school has been on hold for a lot of years. It's just kind of stabilized.
And Lipscomb. If you go out to Lipscomb, you see the portables again.
And I haven't seen those in 20 years.
No, what's going to happen is, yes, you're going to have to build some more schools, but also you're probably going to see some rezoning occur, which doesn't fall under my purview. I'm not trying to run from it. It's just you've got some imbalances that are not occurring in some of these schools.
Yeah, and in some of these schools that have been stable for a while, and I think we discussed this in other shows, it's a population change.
Yes.
Where the homes are being sold to families with young kids. This home grew up their kids already and gone, and now the people are downsizing to someplace else.
That takes us back to an earlier conversation. Those values are holding up, and you and I, as we get a little older, maybe we don't need the same size house. Our children are up and grown, and so we put our house on the market. And all of a sudden you find that your house has got a value that's significantly more than what you paid for it many years ago. Particularly in some areas, it can be as much as a double. If you moved there in the 80s and not really checked the values, you knew that it was growing. You saw your tax assessment go up, but you really didn't see. Some areas of our community don't put a sign out in front of your house unless you want it gone.
Unless you're serious.
Yeah, because there are people looking to move in. Now, that's not true of all areas, but there are certain areas that are little hotbeds for communities to continue to grow.
Well, I remember that at one time people were bidding on homes, and we may get back to that someday in some areas.
And you know, and I think the challenge for all of us in cities and counties is knowing what the other one's doing, being sure we've got good numbers. As some cities now are putting in condos and apartments and different things that come to that community that bring families and bring children. And so you have to have that balance. 20 years ago, we didn't worry about the population in the Cool Springs area because it was a strawberry cornfield.
Right.
But that's not true today. People like that infill of mixed what we call mixed-use development, where you live and work and raise your family all in a geographic area.
Yeah, and I want to bring this around. We're almost have to say goodbye to our audience and each other because you've got to run to Nashville. That with all these new people coming in, I think things like the Veterans Day Parade and the Memorial Day service that we have is important because we've got a history. And people come in not knowing that history, and when you see somebody sitting in the car with the Grand Marshal sign on, you go, "Oh, I didn't know you served. Oh my gosh, you're decorated soldier," and all this stuff, and it brings that history alive, and then people begin to understand why some things are done certain ways, what the names of certain roads, who they're named for.
Can you explain to me why that we've got a road named Henpeck? Would you do some research on that?
I'd love. Yeah, there's some roads that are very interesting. I did find out the name, the meaning behind pull tight, but I have not found Henpeck yet.
I've always, and I'm going to make a little sarcastic remark here. It would be very difficult for me to live on that road to have to say where I lived.
and Gossey Hill too, because most people call it Goosey Hill.
It's not Goosey.
No.
We have some great history in our community, and I appreciate you bringing that up. And we have as a sideline, touch on it before we have to get off the air. Go see our archives.
Exactly.
The old library at 5 Points.
Yes.
If you don't know where it's at.
Learn about that history.
You can find out all the history you want.
And then come back and watch us on County Happenings. See you next time.
Hey, you feeling all right? Hey, that wasn't me. Sounds like somebody just flushed.
Straight piping waste directly into lakes, rivers, and streams pollutes our water and is illegal. Household waste should be discharged to a wastewater facility or to a septic tank. Be sure to avoid flushing things like plastics, diapers, or household chemicals. Clean water. It's all up to us.
I got something. Ew.